In the middle of the 13th century, the world seemed to be ending. From the endless grasslands of Central Asia, a force unlike any before it had erupted fast. Disciplined, merciless. Cities that had stood for centuries vanished in days. Kingdoms collapsed before messengers could even carry the news. From China to Eastern Europe, the Mongols had rewritten the rules of war, and no power had yet stopped them. By the year 1258, the heart of the Islamic world lay in ruins. Baghdad, seat of the Abbasid Caliphate, a symbol of knowledge, faith, and civilization, was burned, flooded, and emptied of life. Its caliph was killed, its libraries destroyed, its people slaughtered. To many, it felt like history itself had been severed. The Mongol tide rolled westward, unstoppable, inevitable. Egypt, the Levant, and North Africa stood next in line. But in the late summer of 1260, in a quiet valley in Palestine called Ain Jalut, the spring of Goliath, that sense of inevitability would be shattered. This is the story of the first decisive defeat of the Mongol Empire, a battle that altered the balance of power, and a moment when the future of the Middle East, and perhaps the world, was decided in a single day. To understand Ain Jalut, one must first understand the Mongols themselves. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous empire in human history. Their armies moved with terrifying speed, built on discipline, intelligence networks, psychological warfare, and unmatched cavalry tactics. Resistance was punished with annihilation. Surrender often meant survival. By the mid-1200s, the empire was divided into regional khanates, but its momentum had not slowed. In the west, Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, was tasked with conquering the Islamic world. His campaign was ruthless and methodical. One by one, cities fell. Nishapur, Merv, Aleppo, Damascus. In 1258, Baghdad's destruction sent shockwaves across continents. The message was clear: no one could stop the Mongols. Yet history rarely moves in straight lines. In Egypt, a very different power was rising: the Mamluks. Former slave soldiers, trained from youth in the art of war, the Mamluks were outsiders who had seized control of the Ayyubid state. They ruled not by bloodline, but by military merit. Their society was harsh, competitive, and deeply disciplined. Survival depended on strength, loyalty, and readiness for war. When news of Baghdad's fall reached Cairo, panic followed. The Mongols had executed caliphs, destroyed capitals, and erased dynasties. Now, they were at Egypt's doorstep. Hulagu sent envoys to Cairo demanding submission. The message followed Mongol custom: surrender and live, or resist and be destroyed. The Mamluk response was swift and deliberate. The envoys were executed, their heads mounted on Cairo's gates. It was a declaration of defiance. There would be no surrender. At the center of this moment stood Sultan ad-Din Qutuz, a former slave. Hardened by betrayal and survival, Qutuz understood what was at stake. Egypt was not just another territory. It was the last major power standing between the Mongols and total dominance of the Islamic world. Qutuz saw opportunity. To confront the Mongols, the Mamluks needed unity, speed, and strategy. Qutuz set aside internal rivalries and brought forward his most capable commander, Baybars, a brilliant tactician. Aggressive and cunning, Baybars understood Mongol warfare intimately and how to counter it. In the summer of 1260, the Mamluk army marched north from Egypt into Palestine. In a remarkable twist of history, they were allowed passage by the Crusader states, who feared the Mongols more than they distrusted the Mamluks. Old enemies temporarily aligned by shared terror. The stage was set. Ain Jalut was a fertile valley, surrounded by hills, ideal terrain for an ambush, and dangerously unfamiliar to the Mongols, who favored open plains. Baybars chose the ground carefully. This would not be a battle of brute force, but of deception. On the 3rd of September 1260, the Mongol army advanced, confident, unafraid, expecting the enemy to break, as so many had before. Instead, they found resistance. Baybars led a forward detachment that engaged the Mongols, then began a controlled retreat. To the Mongols, this looked familiar, an enemy collapsing under pressure. Kitbuka ordered pursuit, believing victory was moments away. It was a trap. As the Mongols pressed deeper into the valley, Mamluk forces surged from the hills on both flanks. Horns sounded, drums thundered. Hidden cavalry units closed in, cutting off escape routes. The Mongols, masters of encirclement themselves, were now surrounded. The fighting was brutal and close. This was no massacre of civilians, no siege of helpless cities. It was disciplined soldiers against disciplined soldiers. For the first time in generations, the Mongols faced an enemy that did not flee. At a critical moment, the Mamluk lines wavered. The Mongol counterattack threatened to break through. Seeing the danger, Sultan Qutuz rode into the battlefield himself, removed his helmet, and shouted a rallying cry that echoed through the valley. His presence restored morale. The Mamluks surged forward. By the afternoon, the outcome was clear. Kitbuka was captured. According to tradition, he refused to beg, warning that Mongol vengeance would follow. He was executed. His army was destroyed. The impossible had happened. The Mongols had been decisively defeated in open battle. The consequences of Ain Jalut were immense. For the first time, the myth of Mongol invincibility was broken. Across the Middle East, the psychological grip of fear loosened. The Mongol advance into Egypt and North Africa was halted permanently. Syria would eventually fall under Mamluk control, reshaping the political map of the region. For the Mamluks, Ain Jalut cemented their legitimacy. Once former slaves, they were now the defenders of the Islamic world. Cairo emerged as the new center of power, culture, and scholarship. The Abbasid Caliphate was symbolically restored there, under Mamluk protection. Globally, the battle marked a turning point in world history. Had the Mongols conquered Egypt, they might have dominated Mediterranean trade routes, altered European history, and reshaped the balance between East and West. Ain Jalut did not end the Mongol Empire, but it set its limits.